After more than 40 years of smiling at people on TV, spinning a big wheel, and being super charming and nice, Pat Sajak shocked fans who had watched him for years. He finally told everyone the real reason he decided to leave the show and walk away. Some people thought the TV bosses pushed him out and made him leave. Other people thought there was secret drama happening behind the scenes that viewers couldn't see, or that he had fights about his contract and how much money he made, or that there were problems and bad feelings that had been quietly building up and growing for many years. But when Pat finally talked about it himself and told his side of the story, what he said wasn't what most people had guessed or expected at all. And in some ways, the real reason he left was way more surprising and shocking than anything anyone had been gossiping about or making up. It wasn't about being famous and having people recognize him everywhere. It wasn't about wanting more money or feeling tired and worn out from working so long. It was something that touched his heart and was way more personal to him. And depending on how you think about it and look at the situation, his choice and decision could be seen as either really brave and bold, or surprisingly controversial and shocking. After spending decades giving polite smiles to everyone and saying perfectly timed jokes and funny comments, most people know Pat Sajak as the calm and collected host, the guy who never got upset and who made Wheel of Fortune feel like it would last forever and never change, but way back before he became the person everyone thinks of when they hear about spinning letters and easy, relaxed chatting and joking around. His life journey and story began really far away from the bright lights and glamour of television. And his path to success didn't always follow a script you could predict or plan out ahead of time. Pat was born with the name Patrick Leonard Sajak on October 26, 1946, in the big city of Chicago, Illinois. He grew up in a working-class neighborhood and environment, the kind of place that offered way more hard work and toughness than fancy parties and glitz and glamour. Chicago was a city shaped by factories and industry, and by people who were strong and resilient, tough and determined. This became the backdrop and setting for a young boy who would later become a master at staying calm and composed even when there was pressure all around him. Unlike so many television personalities and famous people who carefully plan out every step of their rise to fame and success, Pat's path and journey would come through unexpected turns and surprises, starting with a love for broadcasting and being on the radio that would eventually send him overseas into a dangerous war zone and then later guide him back into living rooms all across America where families would watch him every single day. During the 1960s, which was a time of big changes in America, Pat went to school at Columbia College, Chicago. That's where he studied communications, which is all about how to talk to people and share information. And he developed a natural comfort and ease with being behind the microphone and speaking to audiences. He didn't sit around waiting for someone to give him permission to go after his dream of being in radio. Instead, he jumped in early and started working as a DJ, which is someone who plays music on the radio, while he was still going to school and taking classes. But just as his broadcasting dreams were beginning to take shape and become real, life threw him a curveball and sent him into a completely different setting that would change everything. From 1968 to 1970, Pat had to serve in the U.S. Army during the Vietnam War, which was a really difficult and scary time in history. While many young soldiers were sent into dangerous combat situations to fight with weapons, Pat's main weapon wasn't a rifle or a gun at all. His weapon was a microphone. He became a disc jockey for something called Armed Forces Radio, where he would greet his fellow soldiers every morning with the now famous line, "Good morning, Vietnam." It was a greeting that would later become super popular because of Robin Williams, the comedian who said it in a famous movie. Even though he was in the middle of a war and conflict was all around him, Pat brought fun and lightness, comfort, and a sense of home and familiarity through his voice on the radio. It was proof and evidence that he had something really rare and special inside him. the natural ability to connect with people and make them feel good just by using sound and his voice alone. When Pat came back to civilian life after serving in Vietnam and the war ended for him, he didn't waste any time sitting around. He immediately started trying to rebuild his broadcasting career and get back into radio and TV. The 1970s, which was the next decade, saw him make the transition into television. He landed a job and role as a weatherman for a TV station called KNBC in Los Angeles, California. Viewers who watched him noticed something really different and special about him compared to other weathermen. He wasn't just reading the weather forecasts and telling people if it would rain or be sunny. He was actually entertaining people without even trying hard to do it. His subtle humor, the kind that's quiet and clever, and his calm tone and way of speaking really stood out in a city that was absolutely packed with personalities who were all trying super hard to get attention and be noticed. And someone really important was watching him and paying attention. That person was Merv Griffin, who was the creator of Wheel of Fortune. In 1981, Griffin made a big decision that would end up changing both of their careers and lives forever. He selected and chose Pat Sajak to replace the original Wheel of Fortune host, whose name was Chuck Woolery. At first, some of the network executives, the big bosses who make decisions about TV shows, resisted the change and didn't want Pat. They thought Pat was too low, key and quiet, maybe even too ordinary and not exciting enough. But Griffin insisted and kept pushing because he saw something that others didn't notice or understand. He saw a host who wouldn't try to dominate the show and take over everything, but would instead let the contestants and other people shine and be the stars. By 1983, which was just 2 years later, Wheel of Fortune launched into something called national syndication. That's a fancy way of saying it started playing on TV stations all across the whole country, not just in one place. Suddenly, Pat Sajak was everywhere. You could see him on TV screens in homes from coast to coast. The format and setup of the game was really simple and easy to understand. Contestants would spin the big wheel, try to solve the puzzle by guessing letters, and win prizes if they got it right. But what made the show actually work and become popular wasn't just the game itself. It was Pat's special ability to make the contestants feel relaxed and at ease while also keeping viewers at home entertained and happy. He didn't try too hard or force things. He didn't steal the spotlight and make everything about himself. He simply guided the show along like an old friend sitting across the room from you, just hanging out and having a good time. His charm and appeal wasn't loud and in your face. Instead, it was steady and reliable, and people all across America just embraced it and fell in love with him. Within just a few years, Pat wasn't just a host on some random game show anymore. He was actually part of daily life for millions of people. Huge numbers of viewers tuned in to watch, not just because they wanted to see people win prizes and money, but because they loved the comfort of hearing his familiar voice at the end of the day when they came home from work or school. At the very height of his success, when he was super popular and famous, Pat decided to test himself and see if he could do other things besides Wheel of Fortune. From 1989 to 1990, he hosted something called The Pat Sajak Show on CBS. It was a late-night talk show, the kind where the host interviews celebrities and tells jokes, and it was designed and created to compete with Johnny Carson's Tonight Show, which was like the king of all late-night TV back then. It was a really bold move and a very risky one too. Trying to compete with Johnny Carson was nearly impossible because Carson was so beloved and popular. And even though Pat had tons of charm and was really good at what he did, the show struggled really badly in the ratings, which means not enough people were watching it. Within just 1 year, it was canceled and taken off the air. For some people, losing a show like that might have been a crushing defeat, something that would make them feel terrible and embarrassed. But Pat took it all with the same dry humor and attitude that had defined his hosting style from the beginning. He simply returned to Wheel of Fortune without any bitterness or feeling embarrassed about what happened. The failure didn't put a dent in his legacy or make people think less of him. It simply reminded everyone that even the most composed and put-together personalities take big risks sometimes, and not everything always works out perfectly. Throughout the 1990s and the years beyond that decade, Pat's presence on Wheel of Fortune only grew stronger and more important. In 1997, he officially cemented and locked in one of television's longest-running partnerships in history. That's when he began co-hosting full-time alongside Vanna White, and together they became a duo that is now so iconic and famous that their chemistry and how well they worked together is considered actual television history. While many hosting pairs on other shows are built on scripted banter, which means they're just reading lines someone else wrote, Pat and Vanna's relationship seemed totally effortless and natural. He would guide the show and ask questions. She would reveal the letters on the board. He would make jokes, and she would smile knowingly like she got the joke. Their rhythm and how they moved together never needed any adjustment or fixing, because it felt so genuine and real. Together, they made the show not just entertaining and fun, but familiar, almost like having family members you see every day. As the 2000s and 2010s unfolded and time kept moving forward, Pat Sajak's personality became even more defined and clear to everyone watching. He wasn't afraid at all to show his sarcastic edge, which means he would make dry, witty comments that sometimes caught contestants off guard and surprised them. But he always had a twinkle in his eye that showed he was just playing around. Beyond what happened on the stage, Pat occasionally shared his political opinions and commentary on social media websites, and contributed written columns and articles to magazines and websites. While some hosts very carefully avoided expressing their opinions about politics or anything controversial, Pat didn't hide what he thought or believed. Still, even when viewers disagreed with him and didn't like what he said, most people respected that he didn't let those personal opinions interfere with his professionalism when he was on screen hosting the show. In 2019, Pat faced one of the most serious and scary challenges of his entire life when he had to undergo emergency surgery on his intestines, which is a part of your body's insides. For the first time in many decades, he had to step away from the show and couldn't host it anymore for a little while. Vanna White, his co-host and partner, temporarily filled his role as host and took over his job. The moment when Pat was gone revealed just how much viewers really valued him and cared about him. Audiences all over the country expressed concern and worry about his health, and when he finally returned to the show after recovering, people didn't take it for granted or act like it was no big deal. His calm presence had become such a staple and such an important part of people's daily routines that even a brief absence, even him being gone for just a little while, felt really significant and weird to viewers. It was a strong reminder that behind all the polished delivery and perfect hosting stood a real person with real health problems, not just some television fixture or robot that would always be there. Just 2 years later, in 2021, Pat's legacy and what he had accomplished was officially recognized and put on record for everyone to see. Pat Sajak became the longest-running game show host in the entire history of U.S. television, surpassing and beating the record of the legendary Bob Barker, who had hosted The Price is Right for so many years. The achievement was acknowledged by Guinness World Records, which is the official book that keeps track of world records for everything. It was a testament, which means proof and evidence, not just of longevity and being around for a long time, but of consistency and being good at what you do year after year. Hosting a show for decades and decades without losing relevance, without people getting bored of you or thinking you're outdated, is nearly impossible in modern entertainment, where things change so fast. Yet Pat managed to pull it off and do it without reinventing himself or trying to chase trends and be something he wasn't. He stayed true to his own style, calm, witty, and unshaken no matter what. While Pat Sajak's career has often been celebrated and praised for its longevity, for lasting such a long time, and its consistency, for being steady and reliable, it has also been accompanied by a steady trail of debates and arguments surrounding his conduct and behavior and the things he said in public. His legacy is really unique and different in that his controversies rarely revolved around or were caused by major scandals or legal disputes where he got in trouble with the law. Instead, they centered on smaller things: subtleties, tone of voice, phrasing and how he said things, body language and how he moved, or jokes he delivered in moments that some viewers interpreted differently than he intended, seeing them in a different way than he meant them. In an era where every single broadcast moment can be clipped and cut into short videos, shared all over the internet, and critiqued and criticized within just seconds, even the slightest deviation from what people think is polite and appropriate behavior can become a trending topic overnight and spread like wildfire across social media. Pat Sajak, being at the forefront and fronthand, center of daily syndicated television for many decades, eventually became a frequent subject of such scrutiny and examination, especially in the digital age when everyone has a phone and can record everything and share it online instantly. Criticism of his on-screen demeanor, which means how he acted and behaved while hosting the show, developed gradually throughout his long time hosting Wheel of Fortune. It didn't happen all at once, but slowly built up over time. Certain viewers began to question whether his dry wit, his clever and sarcastic sense of humor, was always well received by contestants, and whether they actually liked it or felt hurt by it. While his trademark humor, the kind of jokes he was known for, was often praised for keeping the show lively and fun and entertaining, there were some instances and times where social media users circulated and shared clips, claiming that Pat appeared impatient or annoyed or curt, which means short and kind of rude. Examples ranged from contestants mispronouncing phrases and saying words wrong, to giving unusual and strange responses to questions. And after those moments happened, Sajak would offer sarcastic commentary and make dry jokes about it. Fans who appreciated his style and really liked his sense of humor argued that the sarcasm actually made the show feel more human, demonstrating that even a polished and perfect production could have spontaneous, unscripted reactions that weren't planned out ahead of time. Critics and people who didn't like it, however, viewed some of his remarks as dismissive, like he was brushing people off or belittling, which means making people feel small and embarrassed, suggesting that a host should avoid making contestants feel embarrassed or bad about themselves on national television where millions of people could see it. Although these debates generated a lot of discussion online and people argued about it in comments and posts, they never escalated to formal complaints from actual contestants or disciplinary gestures from the network, which means the TV company never punished Pat or told him to stop. This indicated and showed that the friction and problems largely existed within audience perception, just in how viewers saw things, rather than being real behind the scenes conflict between Pat and the people he worked with. This tension became even more pronounced and obvious during something that people called the lift and spin controversy in 2021. In the clip that drew attention and went viral, which means it spread all over the internet really fast, Sajak jokingly told a contestant to unclog his mouth. After the contestant appeared to stumble and have trouble during speech and saying words clearly, the remark, while quick and playful in how Pat delivered it, struck some people as insensitive and not caring about others' feelings. Viewers who were sensitive to issues of speech differences, like stuttering or other problems people have when they talk, saw the comment as potentially mocking or belittling those people with impediments and disabilities that make it hard for them to speak clearly. Other people maintained and insisted that it was simply an off-the-cuff joke, which means something he said without thinking about it too much, and that it was consistent with Sajak's long-standing personality and the way he had always acted. The divide and split in opinions reflected growing conversations about what constitutes acceptable humor, what counts as okay jokes, in a public setting where millions of people are watching. While the network did not release an official statement saying anything about it, and Sajak did not publicly elaborate on the moment or explain himself, the discourse and conversation surrounding it illustrated and showed how drastically and dramatically audience expectations had evolved and changed over time. What might have once been shrugged off as harmless banter and friendly teasing in past decades had transformed into a topic of ethical examination in modern media culture, where people now examine whether something is right or wrong much more carefully. A similar type of debate resurfaced and came back up again in 2023 when a clip went viral showing Sajak placing a contestant in a playful headlock, which is when you put your arm around someone's neck in a joking way. The act was clearly framed in jest and meant as a joke, and it appeared to be interpreted as friendly by the contestant who was involved and seemed to be okay with it and laughing. However, the footage and video sparked contrasting opinions online, with people having totally different views about what they saw. Some viewers laughed at the spontaneous theatrics and unexpected humor, seeing it as funny and as something that broke the predictable rhythm of the show and made it more interesting. Others questioned whether physical gestures of that nature, touching people in that way, were appropriate in a professional setting, especially in an age where concerns over personal boundaries and consent, which means getting permission before you touch someone, have gained prominence and become really important topics that lots of people care about. Critics argued that even if something is done in fun and meant as a joke, physical contact should always be considered carefully and thought about, particularly when millions of viewers are watching and reacting in real time on social media. Yet again, no official complaint surfaced from participants or producers, indicating that within the production itself and among the people who actually worked on the show, the moment was understood as light-hearted and no big deal. Outside the studio, Pat Sajak's public persona and image extended beyond just being a game show host. This was due to his outspoken conservative views and political opinions. Unlike many television personalities who choose to remain neutral in the public eye and don't want people to know what they think about politics, Sajak made no effort to conceal or hide his political leanings and which side he was on. Over time, as the years went by, he became known for supporting Republican candidates, people running for office from the Republican political party, and engaging in political commentary both in interviews and through written contributions like articles and columns he wrote. His long-term involvement with something called Hillsdale College, which is a conservative institution, a school that teaches conservative ideas, where he served on the board of trustees, which means he helped make big decisions for the school, further established his alignment and showed which side of politics he agreed with. Supporters and fans admired his willingness to stand by his beliefs regardless of public reaction, arguing that entertainers and people who are on TV should be allowed to have political expression just like any other citizen, that they should be able to say what they think. Detractors and critics, however, felt that openly aligning with one side of the political spectrum, clearly showing you support one political party, risked alienating viewers, which means pushing away and upsetting people who turn to Wheel of Fortune specifically for its apolitical comfort. The fact that it didn't involve politics at all. Some people argued that a figure who is associated with wholesome, neutral entertainment with fun family-friendly stuff had a responsibility to avoid polarizing rhetoric, to not say things that divide people, regardless of what his personal convictions and beliefs were. This divide and split between people who liked Pat's political views and people who didn't came to a head, reached a breaking point. In 2014, following what became known as the climate change tweet incident. In a post on social media, Sajak made a sarcastic remark, implying and suggesting that people who were concerned about climate change, worried about the Earth getting warmer, were unpatriotic racists, which is a really charged and offensive thing to call someone. The exaggerated phrasing was meant to be humorous and funny, but for many online readers who saw the tweet, the tone crossed the line and went too far. Critics accused him of trivializing a major global issue, making a really important problem seem like no big deal, while using charged language that could hurt people's feelings. As backlash mounted and more people got angry, Sajak eventually deleted the tweet, taking it down so people couldn't see it anymore, and clarified that it had been intended as a joke. Nevertheless, regardless of his explanation, the reaction demonstrated and showed how quickly a single sentence, just one thing you say online, could reshape the public's perception and change how people see you. Even longtime fans who adored his work on television and loved watching him paused to reflect and think about whether such commentary and those kinds of statements reflected poorly on his otherwise affable image, his friendly reputation that he had built up over so many years. While controversies and personal views have occasionally shaped public perception of its hosts and how people see the people on the show, the legacy of Wheel of Fortune itself tells a very different story. It's a story built not on conflict and fighting, but on endurance and lasting a really long time, innovation and coming up with new ideas, and cultural permanence, which means becoming a permanent part of American culture. Long before its modern-day debates and headline moments when it shows up in the news, the show began as a simple concept and basic idea, a spinning wheel, a word puzzle where you have to guess the phrase, and the thrill and excitement of guessing a phrase correctly before time ran out. It first appeared way back in 1975 on NBC daytime lineup, created by a media mogul and powerful businessman named Merv Griffin, and hosted by Chuck Woolery with Susan Stafford standing beside him as the original letter-turning hostess, the woman who revealed the letters on the board. At the time it first came on TV, it was seen as just another daytime game show entering a crowded television field that was filled with trivia contests and variety formats, all kinds of different shows competing for viewers. But something about the show's structure, its visual suspense and the way it kept you guessing, its familiar rhythm and pattern, and its everyday relatability, how normal people could relate to it, quickly drew in audiences and got people hooked. Viewers didn't just sit there and watch the contestants play the game. They actually played along from their living rooms at home, shouting out answers at the TV screen before the wheel even stopped spinning. That interactive energy, that feeling of being part of the show, was rare for its time back in the 1970s, and it made Wheel of Fortune an instant staple, something that became a regular part of people's daily routines. However, behind the scenes where viewers couldn't see what was happening, early success didn't protect the show from tension and problems. In 1981, a salary dispute between Chuck Woolery and NBC happened, which means they had an argument about how much money Chuck should be paid. This resulted in Woolery's departure from the show, him leaving, leading to a pivotal shift and major change in the show's identity and what it was all about. Enter Pat Sajak, a former radio host and weatherman who was selected by Merv Griffin to replace Woolery and become the new host. At first, executives at the TV network reportedly doubted whether Sajak had the charisma and charm to lead a national game show that would be seen all over the country, but Griffin insisted and wouldn't back down, and the decision he made would end up defining the future of the franchise, the entire Wheel of Fortune brand and show. Sajak's calm delivery, dry humor, and steady presence made him an instant fit, helping transition the show through its first major change without disrupting its rhythm, without messing up what made it work in the first place. A year later, in 1982, another change reshaped its presentation even further when Susan Stafford stepped down, decided to leave, making way for Vanna White to come in. What happened next was something few people could have predicted or seen coming. Vanna didn't just become a co-host or assistant on the show. She became a cultural phenomenon, which means she became a huge deal and everyone knew who she was. Her elegance and grace, charm and sweetness and signature letter turning, the way she would touch the board to reveal letters, quickly became symbolic of the show itself, becoming what people thought of when they thought of Wheel of Fortune. By simply walking across the puzzle board in beautiful dresses and smiling through every single round, she captured national attention in a way rarely seen for a game show assistant, someone who just helps out on a show. Together, Sajak and White formed a pairing so strong and powerful that it would later be recognized as the longest-running television hosting partnership in all of history. The show's form had received its biggest boost and major improvement in 1983, when it launched into syndicated evening programming. That move, putting it on in the evening instead of just during the day, transformed Wheel of Fortune from a daytime favorite into a primetime sensation, a huge hit show that everyone watched. Unlike many shows that faded with time and got less popular as years went by, Wheel adapted to its expanding audience without altering its formula, without changing what made it work. By 1988, it became the most-watched syndicated program in the entire United States, surpassing all other game shows that were on the air at that time. The wheel, which had once been just a prop, just a thing used on the show, became a symbol of American television itself. Families would gather around the TV to watch it together after dinner. Contestants who wanted to be on the show trained for it like athletes getting ready for a big game. Local news anchors referenced it in their broadcasts and talked about it on the news. It wasn't just a show anymore. It was a ritual, something people did regularly as part of their routine. What made it so effective and successful was not complexity or being complicated and hard to understand, but familiarity and being easy and comfortable. Everyone knew how it worked and what the rules were. There were no confusing rules that made you scratch your head, no sudden twists that surprised you in a bad way, just luck with the wheel, letters you had to guess, and the satisfaction of solving something, figuring out the puzzle before someone else did. Then came technological evolution, which means changes in technology and how things work. In 1997, the show made a major visual update by automating its puzzle board, replacing the manual spinning tiles that Vanna used to physically turn by hand with touch-activated monitors, which were like computer screens that lit up when you touched them. Some longtime fans who had watched for years feared the change would dull the charm of Vanna physically flipping letters, taking away something special about watching her actually touch and turn the letters. But her graceful transitions and the way she moved, and her signature hand motions that everyone loved, kept the illusion alive and made it still feel special even though the letters were now electronic. The update made the show feel modern and current without abandoning its simplicity and the basic things that made it work. More enhancements and improvements followed as technology kept getting better. In 2008, the show celebrated 25 years in syndication, which is a milestone that few television programs ever reach, a huge achievement. It remained at the top of its category, still the #1 game show, even as dozens and dozens of other game shows came and went, appearing and then disappearing. Competitors and other shows tried to replicate its formula and copy what made Wheel of Fortune successful, with bigger prizes and more money, flashier lights and fancy effects, or celebrity themes with famous people. But none of them replicated its rhythm or captured that same feeling. Wheel of Fortune had achieved something rare, relevance without reinvention, staying popular without having to completely change what it was. By 2011, Wheel of Fortune stepped fully into the modern broadcast era with its transition to high-definition television, the super clear and sharp picture quality we have today. The LED puzzle board, which uses special lights, glowed brighter than ever before. The set where they filmed received a sleek visual overhaul, getting a fancy new modern look, and the wheel itself gleamed and shined with new color gradients, which means blended colors and digital displays. Yet, despite all the upgrades and improvements and changes to how things looked, longtime viewers who had been watching for decades immediately recognized and could tell that very little had fundamentally changed about the actual game itself. The game was still the same, just sharper, clearer, and polished for a new generation of flat-screen TV that everyone had in their homes now. Even viewers who had watched since the beginning for decades could tune in and feel like no time had passed at all. That was the secret to its longevity, and how it lasted so long. It evolved and changed over time without transforming or becoming something completely different. Then, in 2021, Wheel of Fortune earned one of its most significant acknowledgments and biggest honors when Guinness World Records officially recognized Pat Sajak and Vanna as the longest-running game show host duo in U.S. television history. At that point in time, they had stood side by side, worked together for nearly 4 decades, almost 40 years, weathering everything, going through all kinds of challenges from network changes when the TV companies changed, to social media criticism when people complained about them online, from personal health scares like when Pat had surgery, to industry-wide shifts in programming when the whole TV business changed how it worked. While many shows rise and fall based on trends, what's popular at the moment, or spectacle, big flashy moments, Wheel of Fortune survived by never pretending to be anything other than what it was, a comfort show, something that made people feel comfortable and at home. People returned to it when they wanted familiarity and something they knew and recognized. They tuned in during holidays when they were off from school or work, during national crises when scary things were happening in the country, during quiet weeknights when nothing else was going on. It wasn't about winning a car or a vacation or getting lots of money, although those things were nice. It was about routine, doing something regularly, repetition, seeing the same thing over and over, and reliability, knowing you could count on it being there. Looking back on its journey and the path it took, Wheel of Fortune didn't just endure and survive. It defined an era, set the standard for a whole period of time. Born in 1975, reborn in 1981 with new leadership when Pat took over, solidified and made stronger in 1982 with an iconic partnership when Vanna joined, and elevated and lifted up in 1983 through syndication when it went nationwide. It climbed to national dominance and became the most popular show by 1988, and never surrendered its place, never gave up being number one. It evolved technologically in 1997 and again in 2011, changing with technology while holding tightly to its essence, the basic core of what made it special. And in 2021, it cemented its place and locked itself into broadcasting history, not through controversy or drama or reinvention and changing everything, but through consistency, being steady and reliable, and the same year after year. Few shows can claim that kind of legacy and that kind of history. Fewer still can say they achieved it with the same 2 smiling faces at the front of the stage, greeting contestants with warmth and humor night after night, year after year. As Wheel of Fortune continued its reign as one of America's most enduring game shows, continuing to be successful and popular, its legacy was not without controversy and problems. The series, which was praised for its wholesome appeal and the fact that families could watch it together, and its consistent format that never really changed, also weathered internal disputes and fights, viral moments when things spread all over the internet, and public backlash when people got really mad, that reminded viewers that even the most family-friendly institutions and beloved shows are not immune to scrutiny, are not protected from people criticizing them, and examining them closely. One of the earliest controversies in the show's history took place behind the scenes in 1981, when original host Chuck Woolery became the subject of a salary dispute that quickly escalated and grew bigger, leading to his departure and him leaving the show. Woolery reportedly demanded a pay increase, asking for more money, believing his rising popularity, the fact that he was getting more famous, should be reflected in his compensation, should mean he got paid more. NBC, the TV network, disagreed with him and said no. Rather than negotiate and try to work things out, or attempt to retain the familiar face of the show and keep the host everyone knew, the network made the bold decision to replace him altogether, to just get a new host. It was a risky move given that fans were attached to the original duo of Woolery and Susan Stafford and really liked them. Yet, the network proceeded and went ahead with it anyway, paving the way for Pat Sajak to step in and take over as the new host. At the time, viewers questioned the abruptness of Woolery's exit, wondering why it happened so suddenly, and speculation swirled around and people gossiped about whether the decision had been financially strategic, about money and business, or personally motivated, about personal feelings and grudges. Nevertheless, regardless of what really happened, the controversy marked one of the earliest reminders that longevity in television, lasting a long time on TV, comes not only from charm and being likable, but from careful navigation of internal politics and negotiation dynamics, from knowing how to handle the business side and deal with bosses and contracts. Years later, hosting dynamics and how hosts acted once again became a focal point of public discussion, something everyone was talking about, this time involving Pat Sajak himself. Although he was loved by millions of people for his dry humor and quick wit, his ability to make clever jokes fast, Sajak faced growing criticism throughout the 2010s and into the 2020s as clips of his more sarcastic interactions with contestants circulated online, got passed around on social media websites. Some viewers accused him of being dismissive, like he didn't care, or even harsh and mean, interpreting his tone and timing as evidence of impatience, proof that he was getting annoyed with contestants. These viral snippets, little short video clips, often lacked full context and didn't show everything that happened before or after, yet that did little to stop them from becoming talking points across social media, things everyone argued about in comments and posts. While longtime fans defended Sajak by insisting and saying strongly that his comments were in character with his established humor style, that this was just